Call to order this hearing for the Council of the Borough of Gettysburg. This is a public hearing for March 24th, 2025. The purpose of this special meeting and public hearing is for the Borough Council to receive comments and recommendations of interested individuals residing within the Borough of Gettysburg as the proposed receiving municipality concerning the request of the applicant Gateway Mini Mart Use Incorporated for the intermunicipal transfer of a restaurant liquor license, license number R-21262, LID number 129742, being proposed for use by the applicant at premises located at 517 Baltimore Street within the Borough of Gettysburg, Adams County, Pennsylvania. The subject restaurant liquor license was previously issued for use at the licensed premises located at 985 Baltimore Pike, Gettysburg, Cumberland Township, Adams County, Pennsylvania. I believe we need to record a roll of everybody who's in the room today. All right, so present today we have Rob Glennie, Chief of Police. We have Alicia Sanders, Council Member, Chris Berger, Council Member, myself, Council Member, Solicitor Harold Eastman, Peter Bales, Council Member, Patty Lawson, Council Member, Sarah Stull, Secretary, Charles Gable, Manager, John Whitmore, Planning Director, Rebecca Fissel, Parking Director. And then, I'm sorry, gentlemen, can you state your names? Say it again. Caleb Martin from Community Media. Sean Garrett from Community Media. All right, so this is a request for intermunicipal transfer of restaurant liquor license number R-21262, LID number 129742 from 985 Baltimore Pike, Gettysburg, Cumberland Township, Adams County, Pennsylvania, to the Borough of Gettysburg, Adams County, Pennsylvania. Who would like to start? Do we have to say, what do we do here?
Do you want me to provide as much background as I can?
Yeah, please.
Probably advisable considering the applicant isn't here.
That's right. Although I hope folks recognize that I did copy you on a correspondence to the applicant requesting their presence so that they could give a presentation and answer any questions that the members of council would have regarding the application. If this seems fairly familiar, the Borough Council would have convened in October for a public hearing with reference to the transfer of the same liquor license between the same two premises. That would be premises located in Cumberland Township to 517 Baltimore Street here in the borough. What was different at that time is that the applicant was a Mr. Ravi Singh. In this particular case, the applicant is Gateway Mini Mart, and the Liquor Control Board had use as part of the corporate name. We did double check that it's USA Inc. is the corporation whose headquarters are at 517 Baltimore Street. The borough received notice on January 29th of this pending application. We communicated with the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board because, of course, this is the same, essentially the same matter that the Borough Council had convened to make a determination on, with the difference of it being a different applicant. In conversation or in with the Liquor Control Board and their legal counsel, they indicated because it was a different applicant, different application, and a different identification number, they mandated, or the law required that the Borough Council conduct this public hearing. The purpose of the hearing is for you, the Borough Council, to get input, particularly from the inhabitants of the borough, regarding this proposed transfer of liquor license. It has been advertised. It was advertised twice in the Gettysburg Times. So there was public notice. However, it appears that nobody has convened to present any information to the council regarding any concerns, et cetera, for that. The law basically requires that the governing body of the receiving municipality, so we would be the receiving municipality, where the receiving municipality has equal to or exceeds one license per every 3,000 inhabitants. So where you have that number, which we apparently meet, we have several liquor licenses within the borough of Gettysburg, it mandates that the governing body would conduct this public hearing. So the basic issue that's in front of you is whether the approval of this request for an intermunicipal transfer would adversely affect the welfare, health, peace, and morals of the municipality or its residents. It's kind of difficult if you don't have any information in front of you. So, with that,
So am I understanding correctly that the reason to rehear this was because of a typo on the application?
that is not correct. The reason that we had to rehear this would be that that instead of Ravi Singh as the applicant, it is this corporation that has now applied. It appears Mr. Singh is the owner of the corporation, but corporation is not an individual. It has a separate existence apart from the individual. So because the applicant is a corporation, they filed the application, it mandates that we have to have the, essentially, this is a different matter, at least from the Liquor Control Board perspective.
So question I have is, if I recall correctly, at the previous hearing, the applicant also at that time chose not to appear and instead sent a contractor who would be doing the renovations on the facility to speak on his behalf. Do we have a legal obligation at any point to hear directly from the applicants?
I don't believe that there's a mandate. In other words, that they have a burden to prove, a burden of proof to present to the Borough Council. Really, again, the purpose of the public hearing, although I've never had one that there wasn't any representation on the part of the applicant. Usually, it's a really good idea for an applicant, because we sit here at the request of the applicant. It's because the applicant made the application that we must convene to give a presentation as to what its intentions are with regards to the use of the liquor license. But the other component, and sometimes evidence can be derived from the lack of, let us say, attendance. Actually, one of the most critical components of what the Borough Council does is to get input or get testimony from its inhabitants, anybody who would be objecting. And again, the threshold that we're making a determination is if this liquor license were to be transferred into the borough, would it adversely affect the welfare, health, peace, and morals of the municipality or its residents? So does not appear, at least, that we have anybody who is appearing to object to that.
No. Secretary Still, could the record please reflect that Mayor Freeling is in attendance as well?
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. As there is no public comment to be received, I suppose we then move on to item C on the agenda, which is the motion to approve or disapprove.
That is correct.
All right. Is there anybody on this body who would care to make a motion one way or the other on the approval of this license?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, I heard Mr. Bales first. Any discussion?
Mr. Solicitor, should the entire motion be read into the record or no?
Why don't we do that?
Okay.
For that, essentially, the council is not approving the application at this time. The Pennsylvania Liquor Code requires that council take some sort of formal action by either enacting an ordinance or adopting a resolution. This council has, when we've had to deal with these matters, has done so based on my advice with the adoption of a resolution. So the motion is to direct the preparation of a resolution, which you will take into consideration at your next meeting for adoption.
All right. Chris, would you like to read the entire motion into the record, please?
I'll make a motion to prepare resolution to approve proposed intermunicipal transfer. You don't have to continue there.
Yeah, please read the whole.
A motion to direct the solicitor to prepare a proposed resolution for consideration of the Borough Council at its November 12th, 2024 monthly general business meeting. For the-
Oh, which?
Not sure what
General business meeting for the purpose of approving the applicant's request for the intermunicipal transfer of a restaurant.
I'm sorry. Can you start over? The dates were wrong in what you were reading.
Oh, at its April 14th, 2025 monthly general business meeting for the purpose of approving the applicant's request for the intermunicipal transfer of a restaurant liquor license number R21262, LID number 129742, from previously approved licensed premises located at 985 Baltimore Pike in Cumberland Township to the proposed licensed premises located at 517 Baltimore Street within the Borough of Gettysburg as the receiving municipality.
Second.
Thank you, Peter. All right, is there any discussion?
I had just a question in terms of clarification from our solicitor. Is this unusual that the applicant not appear? I mean, so that we don't hear more from them? If we have been charged with providing, making sure that something like this directs the borough in terms of we are dealing with those three, adjectives describing it, how do we find out more?
Well, essentially, yeah. It is unusual for us not to have the applicant present. Indeed, even the last time, as I recall, again, different applicant, Mr. Singh, had a contractor here to discuss at least the intended work and use of the liquor license. That said, the public hearing, the applicant does not have a burden to present proof to you.
Right. Right.
It's just that it's making it difficult for you because you don't have an applicant present. That being said, the Borough Council is essentially, if you will, let us say, the keeper of the health, welfare, peace, and morals of your constituency. So, and again, this also, even though nobody showed up, we provided a forum in case there were any objections to that transfer.
And it was
So
advertised twice, you
it was
said.
advertised twice in the Gettysburg Times, so we met all requirements regarding public notice.
Okay.
Again, I did notify the applicant. I really thought that the fact that we needed to reconvene because of essentially a new application that seemed to have essentially the same players, I thought we deserved a little explanation, if you would.
Okay.
But that being said, I don't think that impacts how you would make a decision in
Okay.
that respect.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? All right, seeing none, do we vote here? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? All right, we will adjourn. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order this work session for the council for the Borough of Gettysburg for Monday, March 25th. I don't have any opening remarks or announcements, but we do have a special treat this evening. We're going to start with a presentation by our friends Wendy Allen and Chris Gwynn on something we're all looking forward to, I think, the America 250. Folks, if you wouldn't mind speaking from the podium and use the microphone so everybody can hear, especially at home, that would be very helpful.
Thank you, President Moon. I see our Vice President's not here, but I want to thank her as well. Council members, Charles, thank you for the invitation. Chief Glennie, always good to see you. Mayor, always good to see you too. You always know something's happening when I'm here, and it involves something that Chief Glennie's going to be like, ugh, I'm not so sure about this. But let's begin. This is, first let me introduce Chief Interpreter of the Gettysburg National Military Park, and you all know Chris Gwynn, super fabulous to work with, and we're going to play team tag here with this proposal. First, this is going to be our proposal for America 250 that's coming up next year, and it's going to be, it's being driven right now by the Lincoln Fellowship of Pennsylvania and the Gettysburg National Military Park. First, I have a little introduction for you. So that's what we're planning. Nothing small. We're very excited about this, actually. We've started working on this over the summer, Chris and I. We've been working with Jill as well from Main Street. She's been lending a super great assistance with this, and same with Charles. We want to recreate the Gettysburg Address, November 18th and 19th. And we feel that this would be a great signature event for Gettysburg, and especially closing out the year with whatever goes on the 4th of July, and then closing it out on November 18th and 19th, really bring people to town to celebrate, and I'm going to say celebrate, this wonderful event that happened here in Gettysburg, signature event here in Gettysburg. So obviously the Declaration of what's so great about Pennsylvania is we hold these charters in this state. No other state has this. I mean, we own them, and it's really exciting. So we have the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and of course the great Gettysburg Address. So here's what we're thinking about, and all of this is a draft. Let me be clear about this. It's so early, but all of a sudden in the past 2 weeks, kaboom, 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 things are just falling right into place. So we felt it was time we really had to get out and talk about it, make people aware, make the public aware, and we came to you first to share this so that you're all we're all on the same page with this, and certainly we'll take your feedback. But we see Lincoln arriving on the 18th, the evening of the 18th. And we've got some really exciting, we're waiting for a proposal from a train, a consultant. And he's probably the premier train consultant in the country. I'm just waiting to get the budget, his plan. He's very excited about this. He's going to get a great rate from him. But like he said, if we come in on a steam engine, Lincoln comes in on a steamer, we've got not only people who are interested in Lincoln and the Gettysburg Address, but we've got a multitude of people who are interested in antique trains. It could be absolutely sensational. It also might be a great fundraising for us to sell seats on the train. So Lincoln arrives on November 18th. He will go through, we will have him go up to the wheel cells. You know what, I'll let you talk about this. Would you like to talk about it?
Yeah.
Well, first off, thank you all for allowing me to spend part of your evening here. First off, I will say that across the United States, every unit of the National Park Service has been encouraged to find a meaningful connection to America 250. And for some parks, Independence, Valley Forge, it's a very easy thing to do. For others, Everglades, Grand Teton, a little bit more challenging. I think we're very fortunate here at Gettysburg that we have this wonderful community. We have partners like the Lincoln Fellowship and Wendy Allen, who over the past, under both Wendy's tutelage and long before, have executed Dedication Day here in this community, which provides a wonderful way for not only Gettysburgians, but Americans to be able to connect with the words of Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. At the same time, the traditional Dedication Day program. It's by far my favorite community event. At the same time, the format is a bit like the Bill Murray movie Groundhog Day, where it's very much the same kind of general thing year after year. Well, what Wendy and the Park Service and the Lincoln Fellowship are proposing this year, or for 2026 rather, is more of an immersive experience, where rather than simply commemorating Lincoln's Gettysburg Address and the consecration ceremonies that surround it, we provide an opportunity for the community and even the nation to be able to have a sense of being transported in time. So you're going back to 1863, and you're going to get a sense of what it sounded like, what it looked like, down to the individuals who will be on the rostrum participating, down to the way that Lincoln arrives in the community through the train that Wendy was mentioning, the procession that would begin at the David Wills House where Lincoln spent the night and finished the Gettysburg Address, all the way down to the National Cemetery, where we then intend to go through the original dedication ceremony in as realistic and as historically accurate a way as we possibly can, with some obviously concessions to modernity. We believe that by doing that, again, it's going to be a transportive moment for our visitors and for the people of this community and the people of this nation. And I think the power of the Gettysburg Address transcends time. It transcends not only the 161 years separating us from the Battle of Gettysburg, but if you were an alien and you came to Earth and you visited the United States and you asked me, what do you all as Americans believe? Well, I would point them to the 272 words of the Gettysburg Address. I think that's the enduring legacy and appeal of that speech. And so Gettysburg is uniquely positioned to be able to connect with that. As you all know, you've lived here in this community, the Park Service, we're not always the easiest group of people to work with. We guard the National Cemetery fairly jealously. I'm here to tell you this evening that we are 100% committed to working with the Lincoln Fellowship of Pennsylvania in this community in order to execute this event, which I believe will bring national attention to the community. And I also hope that it inspires a new generation of Americans to take a deeper interest not only in American history, but in the meaning of this place. And so, again, we're going to try to recreate it to the greatest degree we can possible. The main speaker that day was an orator from Massachusetts named Edward Everett. He spoke for 2 hours. I don't necessarily know that we'll subject our visitors in 2026 to that full speech, but you'll get a very good sense of it. And what I think visitors will walk away with is that these pieces of oratory, the Gettysburg Address, the other speeches that were given that day, even though they are rooted in 1863, they have a profound transcending relevance to not only who we are as Americans today, but also the struggles that we face. So again, I'll say the Park Service is 100% supportive of Wendy and this vision and the Lincoln Fellowship, and we're also very eager to work with the community to make sure we execute it in a way that's both responsible to the people that live in this community, the taxpayers, and of course all the visitors are going to come to take part in this. So Wendy, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Chris. Now you understand why he's the chief of interpretation. So what we're going to do is we're really going to try to follow Lincoln's schedule here, arriving on the 18th. He comes out in the evening, does give a small speech. So does, I'll back up a slide. So does Seward. He comes out and he gives a really quite interesting speech. We'll have him do that too. We anticipate crowds. We're anticipating a lot of people, right, Charles? But we will recreate the evening of the 18th, which a lot of people don't know about, but it's really fascinating what went on here in town. That'll be the program. We will reproduce the original program, but we will also reproduce a program with timed out so that people can be at places at a certain time. So there'll be 2 programs for everybody to follow. On the 19th, we'll do the procession as it happened. And the Park Service is taking on that responsibility of researching exactly what happened and following it as closely as we can. So we'll be hiring lots of horses and all kinds of good stuff. We expect to have, during that time, there were also kids that were selling lemonade and things on the sidewalk on Baltimore Street. So we're going to hope to recreate that sort of interaction with the public. We're basing it on both Chris and I both love this series, and you probably all have seen it as well. I think it was 1994, they did the Lincoln-Douglas debates in the Midwest, and it was really well done. And what we really liked about it, and my little type at the bottom, the use of time blending, when Lincoln or Douglas came into town, they would interact with the people, not like I can't talk to you because you're not of my time. They would do selfies with the public and interact with them, and we really like that concept. So if Lincoln wants to take a selfie with somebody, it's going to happen. So we're calling it time blending. Now, the fun part. This is what's all falling into place very, very quickly. We want to have notables for some of these key people. Lincoln, we've had a positive interaction with Billy Campbell, who played in Killing Lincoln. He is interested in coming to Gettysburg and playing Lincoln. Should be having a call with him shortly, one of these days, to confirm all of that. A friend of mine, Carrie Thomas Brown, who was in Copperhead. He also is a writer and director for, I think, American, I forget what it is, but he's very busy in Hollywood. He has agreed to play John Hay, Lincoln's secretary. And what I like about Casey is I think I can get him here so we can do some advertising and marketing with him as Hay, inviting people here to Gettysburg. Really nice young man. We're thinking about Dr. Alan Galzo. He has not been asked, so if you talk to him, please don't mention this to him. I've got to call him tomorrow, or write him tomorrow. But we can't think of anybody better than Dr. Galzo to play Edward Everett. And then, of course, following, there's Wardhale Lemon. We'd really like this guy right here to play, because he is the MC of the ceremony. I can't think of anybody better to keep that ceremony on schedule, tight and running. And he's concerned about the beard, but I think we can get a makeup artist in and do that. So I'm strongly urging Chris to play that part. Of course, there's David Wills and the Governor Curtin, of course, John Burns, Seward. We're going to need lots of reenactors. We're going to need soldier reenactors. Chris, I think you mentioned that you've got contacts for that. That's going to be exciting. So right now I'm working on, I'm putting a budget together. I'm looking for funding. We're going to look into artifacts and memorabilia, guide materials, event marketing, periodicals and special editions, getting out into advertising and marketing. Actually, I have a Zoom call tomorrow with a marketer on the East Coast who's very interested in helping out, so I'm going to listen to see what he might have to offer. And then we'd also like to prepare educational materials suited for afterwards from this, really take advantage of all the content that we will be filming and keeping for schools for the future. I think it would be fantastic. So that's what I have. We were just in the planning stage, and now we are in full throttle with this. It's amazing how it's really catching fire in terms of excitement and anticipation. But I think we're going to need this time until November 2026 to really pull together and make it work seamlessly. And report back to you all so that you all know what we're doing and keep everybody up to date. Charles, I keep up to date, and Jill is being kept up to date as well. And working with Destination Gettysburg, too. So it's big, but I think it's going to be really fantastic. Chris, anything to add? Any questions or concerns or?
Wendy, just one question. A couple of years ago, when we discovered that David Wills was an 1856 graduate of the college.
Yes.
Katie Lawn, who was retired from the Park Service, we thought Christian Bales would be an excellent David
Bale.
Wills. So put him on your list there, He looks like him.
He does. Let me add, too, that Gettysburg College is 100% on board with this. If we get the train goes, rain or shine, snow, whatever. The train is in. In inclement weather, we go indoors, and we'll work out possible streaming. It'll be a nightmare, but we'll work out a possible streaming with the college. I'll be meeting with the college week after next. But we're 100% behind whatever effort you're doing, so just everybody knows that. Matt knows, right? So any other questions? Well,
As you further develop the specific timeline of the schedule of events, I think, and you probably already have this in mind, some kind of study guides that can be sent out. You'll be creating wonderful work during it for study guides later, but what about potentially ahead of time
Right.
to be sent to whomever?
Yeah.
So that not our, I mean, I know I hope they are already being taught in the schools, though I'm sure they are, but a study guide with materials that specifically geared toward your timeline of the events that teachers around Adams County and beyond can receive and let their students know about this is happening, and let's study this particular thing that I think you might be interested in.
Yeah, that's a
And
great
maybe then the
idea.
maybe even the school districts could get that information, bring your kid to this event that they've been learning in the classroom. I'm just all about that cross-marketing.
And I love that idea. And just to make you aware that the school district, Gettysburg School District is well aware of this event, with the possibility of perhaps letting the students have a study day that day. And somehow we can engage them in the event, because it would be a nightmare for the school buses that day. But I'm meeting again with him in just a couple weeks, week after next, to go over some more details. So we're keeping the school up to date with what's happening. And there's no guarantee about that school off. I've just heard that rumor, so don't want to commit to anybody or anything. Are there any questions? Again, I want to thank Jill, Charles. We've been meeting regularly. There's a core of us meeting regularly to make sure that we're all on the same page. And this event just really started seriously blossoming in the last couple of weeks. So we had to get out and start talking about it seriously. So I thank you for your time, Charles. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you so much, both of you. It's a lot to look forward to next year. Oh, please, that's wonderful. If you have one for Mrs. Butterfield, we'll get it to her as well. All right, well, thank you both. That was it's very exciting stuff. This is going to take us to our next section on the agenda. Hey, folks. Our first public comment section for the evening. This section is reserved for items appearing on tonight's agenda. If you'd like to speak, we ask that you use the podium, use the microphone, please state your name and address of residence. Please limit yourself to 5 minutes. Is there any public comment? Last chance. Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to current and old business. The first issue we're going to discuss tonight is Lincoln Square camera MOUs, and it looks like Mr. Gable and Chief Glennie will be tag teaming this. Who'd like to start?
So just a little background, in October,
Is your mic on? Thank you, sir.
by way of a little background, in October of 2022, the Borough, through the Police Department, submitted a grant application to the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency under the federal title was the Local Law Enforcement Support COVID SFR federal funding. The grant allowed for submittal in 5 total areas, one of which was technology and technical equipment advances. The grant tied all the funding streams to the improvement of violent crime clearance rates. The department and the borough, through the grant application, requested and was approved for funding to place public safety surveillance cameras in Lincoln Square. The final approval from the state side, or PCCD, for that grant was in mid-2023. Officer Beavenhour was the project coordinator, who is now retired. But in order to properly install and maintain and operate these cameras, we need a power and a network source. So we contacted the Gettysburg Hotel and the owners of the ACNB building to see if they would be interested in assisting with this project, allowing us to hook into their electric and network for the cameras. Both agreed. Officer Beavenhour then requested that Solicitor Eastman and his office drafts MOUs for each of those entities and the borough to enter to for this purpose. The hardware has already been purchased, and the cost of the reimbursements to the borough have been made. But before we can install the cameras, we need to have these MOUs in place to manage expectations of everyone involved. Last year, we had to submit a grant modification, request an extension to get the project completed, since originally the monies had to be spent by the end of calendar year 24. We were granted that extension until the calendar year 2025 ends. And part of the grant, the installation costs were covered as well. Now it's going to be a little more because of the delay. But we can't submit for any reimbursement on that until the cameras are actually installed. So, and just for way of maybe refreshing memories, this is the same grant that purchased all the in-car tablets and modems for in the police vehicles, like this tablet's one of them. Docking stations, both inside and out. But it's the same grant. So we're going to ask you to at some point approve 2 MOUs that Harry has drafted for the owners of, apparently the ACNB building is owned by Twin Bridges Farm LLC, and the Gettysburg Hotel investors would be with the other ones. And it just basically outlines, the expectations of each. Basically that they're going to provide power network services, but they're not, they're going to absorb no cost for anything else, and they'll have access to footage that's not evidentiary. That's my semi-brief synopsis of the need for the MOUs.
Okay. Mr. Gable, do you have anything to add?
I do not. The MOUs are pretty straightforward. I know Ms. Sanders sent me an email to kind of double-check a couple things on them, but I think they're ripe for council action at your April business meeting if you are so inclined.
Was there okay.
Just making sure I caught the same one.
Okay. Is there any discussion from anyone on council? Does anybody have an objection to this? Anybody have any questions for the chief or for the manager? Was this project originally going to have multiple sites beyond these 2?
No, the cameras are designed so that when they're mounted on those 2 buildings, they'll catch all 4 quadrants of the square. So we only need 2 mounting points. And the reason we had to go to the private entities to put them on the hotel and the ACMB building is because all the power that the borough has in the square is on a photo cell that is off during the day. So and perhaps once the square is redesigned, we can reconfigure where these cameras are and get the power. But it's a, for lack of a better term, it's nice of these places to allow us to use network and their power. But maybe eventually we can change it up a little bit as to how they're set up. But for now, this is the only way to get them in there and get them powered based on the limitations of the borough available power in the square.
And will this be sort of a fixed view and
Yes.
depth of field, et cetera?
Yeah, it'll be a fixed view. I think that they're zoomable.
Okay.
But I don't think they'll pan.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have any objection to moving forward with this in our next business meeting? Anything? All right. Great. Thank you both. That takes us to Ms. Fissel and Mr. Gable for competitive marketing for conferences.
If you recall, at last meeting, we had a request, if just for a quick refresher, the Gettysburg Hotel specifically asked for assistance with enticing larger-scale conferences to come do business in Gettysburg during our traditionally slower seasons, December, January, February, maybe a little bit into March. And so council viewed this request for a preferred parking rate for larger conferences that spend overnight hours in the borough. So the staff went back and took that conversation and is now essentially asking the council to consider a formal pilot program. So with the policy briefing summary, essentially the provision for this already exists in section 15105. I'll spare everyone at home from reading the entire citation, but the final part of the last sentence says the purpose of this section is to allow for the test and experimental determination of the feasibility and desirability of permanent changes in the ordinance of the borough relative to traffic and parking. Specifically, our conversation last month revolved around a preferred parking overnight rate for overnights of the Monday night, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday night. Those tend to be the least used nights in the colder months. We are suggesting that the group rate would apply for conferences with a minimum of 2 days overnight or a maximum of 4 days, covering the 4 Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday days. The conference should have a minimum, not necessarily of 100 guests, but say like 100 vehicles that would be staying overnight. Well, I guess it could be guests as well, staying at the hotel and/or any other bed and breakfast or boutique hotel or motel within the Gettysburg Borough itself. And then the preferred rate would be $9 per day per vehicle. Currently, the overnight rate is, or 24-hour rate is $18 per day. With that, I think we should decide if the December 15th to March 15th 90-day period is appropriate, kind of right after the Christmas festival, going right into mid-March. And as we all know, mid-March is the beginning of our bus tourist season specific to the little ones doing field trips to Gettysburg. So with that, I'll turn it over to President Moon for council discussion and direction.
So, again, this is a pilot program that's being proposed, right? This isn't a permanent change to the ordinance. But once again, we're being asked to try something new. It's a pretty great latitude that we're given here to try things as pilots, to say, you know, hey, is this going to work? Does it not? Let us kick the tires on something. We do have still an off-season, though it hasn't really felt as much like that in the last 2 to 3 years. Still, I think most of our service businesses will tell you that the time of year that's being proposed is still difficult to keep maximum occupancy in your businesses. We had a fairly substantial conference here at the Hotel Gettysburg that the feedback was they would like to return here, you know, in a time of year where we are challenged to find reasons for people to bring their out-of-town dollars to us. And but they did have a complaint. They had a pretty sizable complaint, and that was the cost of the overnight permits in the garage. So what's being asked here is basically for a discount if a vendor with a minimum size can bring in sizable conferences. They can bring us some visitors, specifically on underutilized weekdays. Becca, do you happen to have sort of like even a ballpark of, you know, what a Monday in January versus a Monday in, you know, June? Like is it a 10% to 100%? I mean, is there a market difference between our usage in the garage?
I don't have exact numbers, but I would.
Can you ballpark it?
It's pretty drastic. I mean, I would say it's probably 90% busier, 95% busier in June than January.
Even
on a Monday.
Even on a weekday? Yeah. Okay. So this is something we've been asked to do to create opportunity, to bring folks here during a time that is traditionally sort of challenging for us. So I'd like to hear people's thoughts. Good idea, bad idea? Are there better ideas?
In practice, how would it look as far as, like, would we be sending a code or something like that to their organization? They disseminate that to their attendees and say, you know, use this code when you're parking or something? Like, how would it work?
So currently, we set this up with the hotel, and not, I mean, just for any other groups. They email me, they give me the dates and everything. I set the permit up, and then they enter them themselves, their license plate, their name, and then they let us know how many nights they're staying. So the permits are good for those days. And then at the end of that conference, we bill the hotel 50 permits at, 3 days and 45 at 6 days, or whatever the numbers are that the permits were purchased.
When you say they, do you mean the driver, or do you mean the hotel is doing this for the guests?
The hotel is paying, and I'm guessing the conferences reimburse the hotel then.
But is
But
the
the-
hotel entering the name and license plates for attendees?
No, the
How is
guests
that-
are.
I think Peter's question was, how is that controlled? How does the guest get access to that permit?
So the hotel relays that information through a QR code or the site to the borough's permit page, and then they do enter a code. It asks for a key code for your group. So if you went on right now, you'll see a couple free ones. They're all the hotel's conferences right now that are going on, and it'll ask you for a key code to enter so that we know that you are with that group.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Peter?
Yeah, okay. And then they would, this would be for any conference center or hotel in the borough itself that could put on something, right?
Yeah, it looks like we would be looking for conferences or group rates for Mondays through Thursdays, a minimum of 2 days, up to 4 days, and this would be to venues with a minimum of 100 guests staying
Yeah.
because of the permit. Yeah,
But it's not like, it could be hotel, it could be conference center, we're not putting, how would we be wording it?
I mean, that permit would have to be set up. So right now, it depends who's paying for it, because if the hotel is paying for it, currently, right now, they're all staying at the hotel. So we invoice the hotel. But if there's going to be different groups that are staying at different hotels in the borough, we would have to invoice them separately. So it would be different permits, but the numbers would account for all 100 people.
Yeah, I would just add, I think back to when Gettysburg hosted the Pennsylvania Municipal League Conference in 2019. The hotel was at capacity, so there were conferees who were parking in the garage overnight, but actually were not staying at the hotel. So this pilot, it would envision capturing those folks as well.
oh, that's interesting. Okay.
I-
And that
I-
would still go through the hotel?
Yeah, well, yeah, for example, Bradfordton Inn, I know some of our conferees stayed at Bradfordton Inn during that 2019 event, but they were staying, would have parked in the garage. So we would have invoiced both the Gettysburg Hotel and Bradfordton Inn, or, the Best Western, or wherever they have conferees staying, they would.
Okay, so we're tying
Apply
this
this.
more to the conference event as opposed to the venue where people might be lodged?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay.
I really like this idea. There were a number of years where a professional group that I was involved with would have meetings in Annapolis, and they would be at the historic Annapolis Inns, and there are, 10 or 12 of them down there. And so people would be staying in different venues, parking in the garage, and it worked really well. And I remember that conference in 2019 and talked to some of the folks that were at the several B&Bs, Bradford Inn and some on Baltimore Street as well. And it's a great idea, because otherwise we lose to the large conferences, like they'll just go out of town to the conference center where there's free parking in the lot. This is a great opportunity to be creative. So I really like this idea and support it.
Any other thoughts?
I just have a question. Did you say that the conferees that were here in January, February plan to return next year?
They
That's the
would, they
thought.
would like to,
Yeah.
but Andrea Prue, the manager of the Hotel Gettysburg, who pitched this idea to us, or at least asked if there was some type of accommodation the borough could make, because she's trying to regain, keep that business.
Yeah,
What,
that answers it.
okay.
Okay.
It would make it easier for them to book it if we could do that.
All right, any other comments? All right,
I support.
yeah,
Yeah, I support that. Again, I think that needs to be really marketed, not just to the specific hotel,
right.
but for sure, Destination
Conference,
Gettysburg.
yes, yes.
Anybody who's booking helping them book conferences coming to Gettysburg, that's a big, because we see that when they come downtown, we do see that they're out and about when they can get here, if they are down here. If they're staying here, all the better.
Yeah, it's a real way to gain market share back in that particular, area and in terms of larger conferences, and it helps restaurants, it helps other lodging and things like that. So I'm very supportive of it.
All right.
I just have one more thing. Seeing that the end date is March 15th, 2026, I think we're going to need to, as a council, really capitalize on the time, because people will be obviously booking places to stay in 2026 well before March. And so we're going to need to, I think, move a little fast when this is all said and done, that 90-day term is up, in deciding if this is something that we want to do.
Yeah, if council adopts this, we can begin telling tours that, or conferees that this provision now exists.
Yeah, I mean, we should start having data by the end of January, middle of February. By the beginning of March, we should have a sense if there's been successes, failures, pitfalls, places where this could or should be tweaked. We'll, likely be getting feedback from vendors if they think it's not workable or if it needs to be addressed in a different way. So we could probably be moving fairly aggressively to institute a policy change there.
Would that be necessary for you, Becca or Charles, to shorten the term, or do you feel like you need the 90 days? Would you rather shorten it so that we could make a decision if this is something that would be working, or would you rather have the 90 days to ensure that is something that, does that make any sense? Does that make sense?
Well, we can terminate a pilot program
Yeah,
if we want,
yeah,
but
And just move forward, like, let's say this is really working and you're seeing a lot of businesses or organizations and conferences coming into Gettysburg, to just make sure that you have access, or the borough has access to some of these folks who may be wanting to make sure they have a place to stay and they have that parking rate early in the year.
we also have the capacity to extend it,
Yeah.
the period on it too, if we're not quite sure,
Right.
whether we've, figured out the right dates or whatever. We can push it another 90 days. Isn't that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, to, see if it still needs tweaks or not before we act. Or we can
Yeah.
just extend it as a, another 90-day pilot period while we work on,
Gotcha, okay.
any policy change. All right, well, I'm hearing pretty wide support for that. Thanks for bringing that to our attention. I think it's a really good opportunity for us to smooth the road for some of our local businesses to bring folks here. So thank you. We're going to move on to new business. The first thing tonight, we're going to talk to Mr. Whitmore and Mr. Gable about special events permits and free speech provisions.
Why don't I start, well, the issue of special events related to free speech is the impetus for the discussion of this topic tonight. But more broadly speaking, the special event permit process for the borough needs to be tweaked anyway. For those who have not ever been the producer of a special event in the borough, it is a fairly arduous process to go through. And I do think there are areas we could streamline. However, there are other areas where we really do need more information from the producers of special events. So broadly speaking, I'm going to turn this over to Planning Director Whitmore to talk about the general ideas he has as it relates to special event related to freedom of speech. The mechanics I'll address here very briefly. Currently, when a producer of an event wants to put on an event in the borough, there's an online form. These are fillable PDFs that just put in your basic information, your name, contact information, what you want to do. Doesn't really talk about how you want to do it. So there's really nothing in the event permit application that addresses refuse collection, for example. It's some other things like that we need to address, and also Chief Glennie would be curious to figure out more security protocols as it relates to how we do these special events. Essentially, then what happens is the application is given to the planning department, is intake by Karen Mesher, our administrative assistant. She reviews it, and then each department head gets a set of eyes on the request, and if there's expenses associated with the special event, then that department head puts an estimate of those expenses. Ultimately, that goes through each department and lands on the manager's desk, who gives final signatory authorization to proceed with the event. The issue related, so we can talk about the mechanics of that in a different forum, but specifically tonight, we've been challenged with multiple events wanting to share the same spaces at the same time, specific to Lincoln Square. Part of the reason we have the special event permit process is to ensure that one event is not infringing on another event. And so that once we approve these events, they get put onto the borough calendar, and we know that if a subsequent event comes in requesting the same date and time, that permit then would be denied because someone else has already been approved for that date and time. So we can talk about the mechanics of that. Freedom of speech issues are a different category of a special event in my mind, just because of the constitutionality of them. And the current process is too arduous for them to meet our standards for planning and reservation of the spaces in town. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Director Whitmore to discuss his thoughts on how to streamline that for freedom of speech purposes.
So Charles did a really good job of just bringing up to speed the general impetus of the special event permit. It's the basis of an individual having the right to utilize public right-of-way, the streets, sidewalks, and in certain instances, some non-public areas. The issue that we're running into, especially as it relates to protest activity, is it becomes very difficult for someone that's trying to comply with our ordinance to be able to quantify expected turnout for future events that may be based on current events. So it creates, there's a lag time that happens when submitting the application and actually getting to the event, in which case scenarios on the ground that may have been planned in advance go right out the window. That's a concern for the police department, in that we have to be able to provide them with accurate information so that they can make determinations on how many officers to be present, if a response is needed, or if it can just be something just as thought of as just a regular assemblage of persons. Generally, and Chief Glennie's here, I'll defer to him on any of the specific numbers, but my understanding is once we get to around 30 people, that's when we really need to have the special event permit information. When we get instances throughout the borough, throughout the year, where individuals or small groups will hold protests in the square, if it's not interfering with flow of traffic, it's not something that's going to come to our attention. It's not to say that someone's not going to call 911 to make a complaint. There may be a police response associated with it, but it's not something that's necessarily going to be permitted. There's also allowance within the ordinance for spontaneous events. So there is this idea that there could be just a need or a want from the community to go to the square, go to some public place all en masse. It's allowed. The problem we're running into, though, is to be able to provide information that's accurate to all the departments, what we're requiring from applicants is generally one application per physical event. So if you have a recurring protest, we would have recurring applications. Additionally, the provisions in the ordinance are pretty strict as they relate to fees. The provision allows for waiver of fees, but there is supposed to be an affidavit on the part of the applicant indicating that they are indigent, can't really meet paying those fees. So that's not necessarily something that, I don't necessarily think that that's something that is beneficial to the borough, so it's definitely something we want to discuss with council. Other than that, I mean, it makes sense from a certain standpoint to require an applicant to fill out an application per event. The other reality, though, is it takes time to fill out these applications. It's not exactly a thrilling thing to do. We do have opportunities where we can make the application process a little bit easier, but still, if there's an expectation for, say, a weekly series of protests occurring all year, that's 52 applications. That's something that we probably could handle a little bit easier from an administrative standpoint for ourselves as well as the applicant. So that's where we are tonight.
All right, so in the interest of full disclosure, I will tell my colleagues here that I am a member of an organization that has brought this question to bear. So I do feel compelled to not be involved in the conversation too dramatically here. I would rather that the rest of you direct this conversation. The issues that did come up, though, were I think historically and traditionally, we have typically tended to forego the fees when it is a First Amendment event. It seemed like that may have suddenly changed. You may wish to discuss whether the borough should be in the business of making money off of people expressing their constitutional rights. And then the other issue, is if somebody is planning recurring events, then we are requiring applications on a event-by-event basis. We're not only making it onerous for the applicant to express, again, their constitutional rights, but we're also creating a lot of busy work for the staff as well. Signing off on a selection of dates one time could possibly, potentially be a less intensive task for every single department head than, say, doing 52 of these. And if these applications are taking 2 to 3 weeks to turn around because they are sitting in the inboxes of some very busy people, one after the other, over and over and over again, we do lose some of that ability to react dynamically to the needs of the voters and taxpayers. So at that, I will stop talking, and if you could all please discuss how you'd like to proceed with this, I would appreciate it.
Well, I'll start. I think, I don't presume to speak for everybody, but I will speak for myself. I'm sure that everyone wants, I would hope that everyone wants a bustling downtown and a safe downtown at all times. I think that when it's a special event such as the Christmas Fest, Salsa on the Square, Gettysburg Pride, things that are obvious events that we need to block down a portion of a state highway for said event with stage and entertainment and vendors, et cetera, that's one thing. But when it is a freedom of speech or a rally or whatever it may be from any side of the whatever political spectrum you want to look at, whether they are planning it or not, the point is it can happen at any time, at any day that they decide that they're just going to show up. And we've seen it. We saw it in 2020. I was at some of them. Some of them. then I felt I had to step back a little bit. It got a little overwhelming. But the main reason I stepped back is I didn't like the other side that I saw with AR-15s and pickup trucks on Lincoln Square. But my point in all this is that we all, I think, can agree. We just want everybody to be safe. We certainly want everybody to be able to speak their mind. That is one great thing about being in this country. But they're going to come regardless. People will always come to Lincoln Square. You know, we can talk all day long about religion and politics and not see eye to eye on every little thing. You know, I have friends that live in this town and friends that come and visit from other states in the summertime, and they say, are these folks that are on the square in June saying repent your sins and all of that? Are they here because there's pride flags out? I said, no. They're here every summer. And they have a right to be here, just like I have a right to be there on the rainbow flag in June if I want to, or any day. But my point is, that I'm not making very well, is that they're going to come regardless. We do want them to be safe. They meaning anyone. It's freedom of speech. We do want everybody to be safe, though. If we do, however, have a group that is willing to let us know, hey, we're planning this, and we're planning it on this many days, and we think there could be anywhere from 20 to 60 people coming. Who knows? We don't know, and it may very well grow. I applaud those groups that are letting us know we want to do this, and we want to do it on Lincoln Square, and here are the dates. I agree with President Moon. I do not think that this borough should be making a habit of looking like we're making money off of these freedom of speech events. But I do think we do need to take into consideration how to make it efficient for our staff and safe for the public.
I have a question and a comment. A question for Chief Glennie. When the permits are taken out and people are protesting on the square, is there like a fire code limit in terms of how many people in each quadrant or total number of people that are permitted? Do you know?
So I'm not aware of a fire code number for any of the quadrants in Lincoln Square. What I am aware of is that the walkways cannot be obstructed. They have to be left open. So people have got to make sure that they can get through there, and they've got to be not only get through there, but it has to be ADA accessible. So whatever the ADA says how wide that has to be, that's how wide that has to be. Our current special events ordinance requires a permit for 30 or more people. So it's specific. So John did a pretty good job explaining that, with the exception of there's a hard, fast number in there. And back in 2020, we went through this whole thing a number of times over in Mr. Eastman's office about, when do we require permits, when do we don't. But specifically to answer your question, Ms. Lawson, no, that there's no specific number of people that are allowed in each square, but the borough ordinance does require a permit for more than 30 people participating.
Okay. Thank you. And when someone fills out a permit and for an organization, are they informed that they need to keep a certain passageway open or free? Is that part of the material that goes out, okay,
Yeah,
that's good.
Ms. Mesher always informs them of that, and in all honesty, I make sure, when I sign off on them, I'll write it down right on the bottom of the permit. Becca's laughing over there because she sees it all the time. Must maintain walkways, can't stand on the road.
Okay.
And it's, I've said a number of times to this body, I can't tell you can break the law, and if you go out and stand on the
Right.
road and it's not closed, that's illegal.
Okay.
But yeah, I make sure we note that, and Karen does a pretty good job of telling them those things when they pick it up.
Okay, because I've been on the square where we've been moved to other, down the street,
Yeah,
so I just wanted,
I recall that specific purpose,
Right.
and what we were doing
Right.
there is, the permit was actually a different area
Yeah.
for what was applied for. So
Okay.
basically, if I'm recalling correct, I just asked you to kind of split your group up a little bit, and then that way you went well below the 30 number, and then there wasn't any issues.
Right, okay. Yeah, I think it's important that the organizations understand about having clear passageway. And I do support the idea if an organization, whatever organization it is, that's going to have an event or protest repeated on the square, that just to simplify things for the organization and then for borough staff, that they list the days and they don't have to fill out, if it's 35 weeks that they're going to be out there, or 52 weeks, that it's all in, those dates can be put together and compiled so that it cuts down on the paperwork. I'm in support of that.
If 50 people show up, then what do we do?
You need a permit. If they didn't get a permit, we've established a precedent through, well, it's not a court of record, but we have cited folks for not having permits, and they have been found guilty for not obtaining the proper permit. We've not gone after, I don't think we've tried to enforce the fee portion, just the portion of, the borough requires a permit with 30 or more people. I will speak a little bit to the multiple dates on a permit. My issue with that is I see more counter protesters showing up in that because there's not an opportunity for them to get a permit, and oftentimes there's friction there, and then we do have to get involved, and I'm not saying it's arrest, but then we do expend resources down there to, I hesitate to use the term referee, but that's kind of what's happening.
So if they say, well, it's our constitutional right, we're going to stay, then what? We arrest
Well,
them?
The Supreme Court has said we have the right to regulate time, place, and manner, just not speech.
Okay.
So the ordinance is constitutional, and I do agree it needs tweaked. But we have cited for not having a permit. But once things really started to roll in 2020, people got permits, and we dealt with them. We have what we did when the permit would come in, and we thought it was going to be a bigger protest, is we would set up a counter protest area, and we would actually, again, we can regulate time, place, and manner. So we move some of those folks into, we'd reserve a quad for that. So, okay, you go over to the ACMB quad if you want to do this. That way it eliminates some of the friction between the two. Because our job in that instance is not to regulate any of the speech. Our job is make sure everybody's safe.
Sure.
I will interject a little bit here. I know I said I wouldn't, but I just want to say that 2020, which you all may recall, was an absolute garbage year. Those protests were challenging. The entire universe was challenging, and I do want to say that even though there was a number of frictious events, I do believe that the chief and his department worked towards that very specific goal of keeping people safe. We did have to address how we were dealing with what were volatile situations, potentially volatile situations. And I just want to, on the record, say we did work through all that stuff together as a team, and I want to thank you for that. He sort of alluded to one of our events where somebody was cited for a large protest, which was a peaceful protest, but it did get to be so large that the organizers really sort of lost control over it. And one of the things they didn't do, because they chose not to pursue the permit, and the counsel they would have been then given about maintaining walkways, sidewalks were completely obstructed in the section where this was happening. And I was there, and I witnessed a woman who used a wheelchair who had to go out into traffic on the square because the sidewalks were completely impassable. We have even when we're expressing our constitutional rights, we have, I think, a responsibility to take care of our neighbors as well, and our rights do not supersede the rights of others. So there are good reasons to have permitting in place, and there are also excellent times to exercise your civil disobedience if you feel the rules are inappropriate. But knowing what the rules are and why they're there is every citizen's responsibility.
I have a question for anyone on staff, Chief, or Charles, or John, or Becca. So when you say it's an arduous process, what is the most arduous task? So is there something that we as a council can help to fix? I know that's why it's being presented, but what part of the application process is causing the most, I guess, frustration with staff or with anyone for that matter in the process?
Couple things. One, I would suggest essentially a standalone permit for essentially the same activity every Saturday over the next 6 weeks between the hours of 11:30 a.m. and 1:30 p.m. Here's the form. They would have to fill this form out for each one of those standalone events, even though it's the same event. In practice, we, and frankly, maybe we're not following the ordinance as written, but for example, it's not a free speech issue, but for the Arts Council and the Parklet, they provide us a monthly event schedule. They pay their $40 event fee, and for that $40, they get reservations on the Parklet for performances and other types of activities on a monthly basis because it's recurring. Sure. Yeah, the band name might change, but the activity is the same. To me, the protests we're talking about here that started this conversation in my mind are very similar. Why not allow an organization to reserve an hour and a half every Saturday for 4 weeks at a time because it's essentially the same activity. And then staff knows that if another permit comes in requesting that same space for 11:30 to 1:30 every Saturday, we know that request would have to be denied because someone has precedent at that point or some organization has precedent. As it relates to freedom of speech or protest issues, again, the $40 fee. A lot of times these are not nonprofits, they're not for-profit organizations, and frankly don't have the ability to provide not only the $40, but sometimes an indemnity letter, or which is also part of our application process, providing liability insurance as additionally insured for the borough. So those are some of the mechanics, I think, that are arduous for First Amendment protest issues.
Okay, thank you.
So we would limit the consecutive times to a month? Is that what was considered?
If I can add, I did actually speak with the Chief Law Enforcement Ranger at the Park Service, referenced this because I wanted to know what they did with multiple dates for a permit request. And he gave me a specific example of their amphitheater, and Chief Lukowski said the Park Service will only do 2 weeks in a row. They will only let them do a permit for 2 consecutive weeks, and then they'd have to do another one, which I think is better, because I can envision somebody saying, oh, well, they're going to file for a First Amendment permit here, so we're going to go file 2, if we're doing it for multiple, long periods of time, and that's going to become problematic. The one thing I would like to say before I lose the thought track in my mind is we do need to tweak this and get it right with what we want to do, because every time we deviate from this, that's an argument somebody can use if we do have to cite them and go to court. Well, you didn't enforce this part, why are you enforcing this part? And that may be a compelling legal argument. So we need to make sure we've got the thing squared away as to what we want to do with it.
I would be in agreement with if we can streamline the process, and maybe we do put some type of limit on it, maybe not 2 weeks, but something so that you guys aren't as tied up. I don't think we should be charging for a freedom of speech type of issues like this, or gatherings, rather.
So if we don't charge, what becomes of the cost that would be associated with the protection that's needed? because no matter if you have a gathering of 30 or 300, I mean, the police are going to be needed, you know, to secure downtown and, you know, I mean, where would that come from?
Well, the $30 isn't paying for that, right?
Right, right. Well, yeah, I know, but I'm just thinking, I mean, where would it come from? I mean, otherwise.
So your,
Our taxes.
the bottom line is your tax dollars.
Okay.
For 2020, you spent thousands of dollars.
Right.
uh,
Right.
For us to be on the square on multiple, thousands of
Right.
dollars. And that, because we can't bill out, if, you know, for example, if they wanted to close this quadrant of the square, then we could, you know, bill something for that, but just a First
Right.
Amendment protest. And I'm actually in favor of what Mr. Bale said too, if we eliminated that $30 fee or $40 fee for the First Amendment ones, and maybe even the indemnification letter. I understand it for the parades and marches and those things, but when it's a First Amendment activity, it is somebody's right.
Sure.
No matter, you know, what you may think of it, it's their right. So as long as they're, you know, we're not violating you know, the sidewalks and keeping them open, and people aren't blocking roadways and interfering with businesses and those things. My
I
thoughts
I
for
would
what they're
support
worth.
that too, Chief, absolutely.
Yeah, I was surprised to learn that there was a cost at all involved. I don't think I knew that until I was reading over the special event permit application. That was a little surprising, so.
Yeah, as I recall, that was just intended to defer, that there was going to be administrative time in terms of processing these, and it was not a very large fee that would be chilling, if you would, for
Right. For groups,
persons.
too.
But also, you know, making sure that it was a serious, you know, that it was a serious application to use borough space. With reference to, I mean, indemnity and so forth, the thought process was, if an organization had liability insurance, it doesn't cost them extra to have essentially an indemnification for the borough for the special event. They're already paying. The issue is, and I don't think we've required anybody to actually get insurance or deny because of a lack of insurance. So, again, not intended to be chilling, if you would.
Right.
But
because it
if,
could-
you know, I mean, we still have a duty to protect the overall public, and of course, the borough from liability, if you will.
Right.
Yeah, the fee is not exorbitant if you're doing your event one time. But if you're doing it 10 times, all of a sudden you're looking at $300.
Right.
So, you know, maybe I'm not indigent, but do I have an extra $300 burning a hole in my pocket, right? Like, that's a different question.
Right. Or if you're a student group, as I was thinking of all the student groups that are protesting and they tend to gather pretty quickly, they certainly wouldn't necessarily, as a group, have the funds to support that effort.
One sort of safety valve I think we would want to include is, you know, we wouldn't want somebody reserving, you know, the square every Saturday for the next 4 months and then just not using that and prohibiting anybody else from using it. I mean, I'd say if you miss your event, the permit is canceled. Does that seem like a reasonable safety valve?
That seems reasonable. I agree, I don't think there should be a fee. I don't agree that we should limit the number. I feel like that people that want to gather and at least let the borough know and go through the process of an application, even though there's an argument that says technically they don't have to. You know, I know that there's as Chief said, that we can mandate the time and or what was the word you used?
Time, place, and manner.
Time, place, and manner.
Well-
But they could also, and they have, for example, when people come to protest said event that don't have an application, and they have more than 30 people, are they in violation or not?
Well, it would depend on their activity. So, for example, if they're impeding an outdoor dining space, then
But my question is, say a group did the application and was granted the permit. Say another group came to protest against that group. that didn't do
there's-
anything,
and there's
but just
29
showed
of
up.
them. Right.
And there's,
29.
or 30. My question is, what's being done to, what are they doing? What do we do to them?
If it could be proven that they were an organized group that came down there to undertake a special event, then they would be in violation of special event ordinance. But if it's difficult to prove, because they're going to say, you know, well, I don't know these people, or we just came down to protest this particular group on
Right.
our own.
Right.
So it doesn't apply to individuals, it applies to groups.
So then it just becomes really a question for you of orderly versus disorderly conduct.
Yes,
Right. Right.
yes.
But that's my point,
Yeah, I think if we do,
that
you know,
anybody can come at any time and do it.
there's a, you know, a happy medium to be struck between unlimited lists of dates and, you know, maybe 4 at a time or 8 at a time, in that if we were to say, okay, but if you don't show, you lose one, then you can still apply the next month for the next set of 4 if you want. You won't, you know, you don't lose the whole 20 weeks of reservation or
I
whatever.
would just encourage that we, you know, for the sake of trying to maintain peace and safety in downtown, if there are protests that come, whether we can prove or not, we should make sure that we identify them, let them know, hey, here's our process, follow it for next time, and hope for the best. Because I think that the more, if we're going to have an application process for freedom of speech groups, whether they're coming, whatever topic they want to stand on the square or walk around the square or whatever it is that they want to do, if we're going to create a process for that, then we also have to then educate the public and the visitors on said process. It's, the case in point is our, you know, what we're going through right now with, you know, landowners that don't, or say they don't, or the tenant says that they don't realize they're supposed to shovel the snow off of the sidewalk, and they're supposed to cut the grass. Well, we're educating them on that. We have a process. We need to educate the public and do it. If we just sit idly by when a protest comes and not let those protesters know, hey, we have an application here that you need to follow the next time you come.
Right.
I do think that's happened in the past.
Repeatedly,
Yeah,
every time.
I thought so.
Yep.
I'm glad to hear it.
Yep. Okay, so
So-
have you heard enough to create a framework here for
Yeah,
how we
I,
would move
I
forward?
think we have enough to provide some draft language at a subsequent meeting. In the interim, we're cobbling along and making it work.
Okay. Okay. Anybody have anything to add on that? All right, thank you for a thoughtful discussion, everybody. All right, our next new business item is parking, Chapter 15, process and authorization for ticket dismissals and/or voids. Becca.
Let me kind of introduce the topic. So, everyone's favorite chapter in our Code of Ordinances, Chapter 15. I think we visit this at least every year, if not several times. Parking Manager Fissel and I went through Chapter 15 with a fairly fine-tooth comb, and there are parts that need clarification and/or tweaking. But the impetus, again, for this particular discussion tonight isn't necessarily the cosmetic alterations, if you will, of Chapter 15, but rather the fairly substantive omission in it. And Mayor Freeling's chuckling over there, I can hear her from across the room, because she and I and Manager Fissel have been discussing this topic since essentially your swearing in, where there's been a gentleman's agreement essentially in the borough, for lack of a better way of saying it, where it's just been the case. Wherever a ticket was issued, a dispute of that ticket always was sent essentially to the mayor for adjudication, to tell the individual, nope, you're guilty, you need to pay, or the mayor would dismiss. And we've been operating under that process for ever. I mean, Yeah, yeah, at least since 1985, when most of the current Chapter 15 was adopted. And there is no reference to the mayor, the manager, the parking manager for said dismissals of tickets in the ordinance. So that is why we are discussing this tonight, is what is going to be our formal process for adjudicating disputes as it relates to issuance of parking tickets. This is not to say that tickets are being issued in violation of the law. They are being properly issued. The question is, what do you do with a ticket when someone wants to dispute the ticket? The ordinance is very clear on the types of violations for parking ticket offenses, and that this conversation does not change any of that, but rather, what do you do if you disagree with the ticket being issued? There's a couple thoughts here. What we're proposing is the closest section to this is section 313, 15313, parking tickets, payment of parking tickets, and then you can see where we've started to add some draft language, prosecution of unpaid parking tickets and dispute of parking tickets. For purposes of discussing this right now, we are proposing that for disputes of parking tickets, the borough manager, or in their absence, the mayor, may dismiss or void a disputed parking ticket subject to the following provisions. We think we should create a formal process to dispute a ticket. We do not have this formal process yet, where you fill out a form, the time your ticket was issued, your ticket number, and why you think the ticket was or should be dismissed or voided. And I think dismissed and void should have different definitions, because I think they are slightly tweaked. So a dismissal, for example, is I've mentioned this to Mayor Freeling a couple times. If you think someone, for political reasons, it would be to the betterment and the reputation of the municipality to dismiss the ticket, then that would be more of a political reason that the mayor would do. A void, for example, is if the tissue were issued in error, whether it was a human error or if it was a mechanical error. So I do think there's nuanced differences in a void versus dismissal, so maybe we should add definitions to those in this section. The time is, should there be a time limit for you to dispute? Right now, if you don't pay its parking ticket within 30 days, then we escalate that to the district magistrate, for example. So right now, for example, overtime parking rate, you're issued a ticket of $40, but if you pay that rate, pay that ticket in 7 days, you get the $15 discount, and your fine is only $25. Should that 7-day window be your dispute period? You know, you must file your dispute claim within that 7-day provision. Once that's filed within that 7-day, then that will essentially freeze the discount period until that ticket is adjudicated and resolved, whether it's voided or dismissed, or you must pay, and if you question it, then you go to the district magistrate. So these are all the things that we are here to talk about. And Solicitor Eastman has a very inquisitive look, probably questions in his mind.
About 1,000.
All right, so I'd like to start with a question for the solicitor. Is there anything in the Borough Code that stipulates where the appropriate place for this authority would reside?
I don't believe so. I mean, essentially, as I understand, what we were dealing with previously is not, I mean, the law does provide for an adjudication of ordinance violations, tickets, that sort of thing. I don't know that we want to get into the adjudication process that is already well laid out and so forth. It was intended, or at least my understanding is that historically, what we were trying to do was reverse or void tickets that were issued in error, that were improperly issued. But I think it's expanded. I know enough to know that people, said I was attending a political function. I'm an important person. I should not have to pay a parking ticket. We've seen a number of those.
Yes, we
so
have.
far. And, it's kind of like, but there really isn't any parameter, if you will, to deal with that.
For the record, I have paid all my tickets. I just want to. So, I think there's, I think probably the reason that historically this authority has resided with the mayor's office was because there was a time when all parking enforcement was done by the police department, and as the direct oversight, you would be or your office would be the supervisor in charge of that department and could say, yes, the officers enforced correctly, or no, I agree with you, you shouldn't have gotten this ticket. And that's probably, for our borough specifically.
President Moon, I agree, because
Sorry. I was going to say, it's probably vestigial more than anything.
I think I agree with that, because I could not find anything in writing. I've asked people for things in writing about what this process is, and I think it's a leftover from when
Yeah.
the parking department came under the mayor and the police.
Yeah.
And I thank you for addressing this issue, because I think it's
Yeah,
something.
no, you've brought it up multiple times.
Whoop.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I just
Yeah, please.
say a couple things here? So I would like to see any ticket issued by a police officer that could be voided, number one, by that police officer, number two, by me, or number three, by the mayor. And let me tell you why. Because I'll give you an example. If somebody's writing a handicap ticket, and I go out and I see a car that's parked in a handicap zone, and I walk out and I've got the little machine, which frankly I don't even know how to use, so I'd have to call one of the guys to come down and show me how to use it. The machine, and I get it all punched in and it prints out, and here comes the person out, and they're definitely handicapped, and I forgot to put my permit up. They reach in, they pull it out from above the visor. Now I've got a ticket in my hand that's now in the system. Now, if we put this in place, now I got to take that whole thing and I got to give this to you, and you're going to have to file an appeal to this, where if the police officer can dismiss them on their own, they could say, okay, we understand. So that, or give me that back, I'll take it to the mayor, tell her what happened, she'll dismiss it. The second thing I would say is we get, not frequently, but occasionally, police officers that walk in and say, hey, I was in a jury trial in court at the courthouse, and I got this ticket on my car for overtime parking. So these guys, they can't run out and put more money in the meter. They can't do a lot of those things. So those we give them to the mayor, she voids those. So those are my two examples for that. And thirdly, I personally don't even discharge my officers' citations. If somebody said, hey, I want that citation discharged, I'll say something to the officer, I'll let it up to them. And I would say, as far as the tickets go, they're technically not charging documents because
Right.
they're not processed, they're not going to a court. So it makes them simpler to void or dismiss than a citation or something like that.
I would probably respond that I think allowing officers to void their own tickets, if we were going to extend that to your department, we'd extend that also to the parking department, and then we get into a situation where, undue scrutiny could fall on any of our enforcement officers. I think it's probably better to leave that decision with a supervisor, depending on the situation. We might discuss whether, the scenario he's described about, the accessible parking ticket issued by a police officer, can that be dismissed by the chief? We can talk about that, right? And for your officers who are in court, they can add time very easily through the app, I would point out. It's a convenient way to, rolling in your eyes. Yeah, no, I deserve that. I think it also could make, I think that it makes a certain amount of sense to leave this responsibility with our career staff members as opposed to an elected official, as we don't always spend 100 hours a week in the building. But, if we don't happen to, if any elected official were to just, not check their messages for a week and now somebody's out of that appeal period, that's problematic. Whereas we have full-time professional staff who are in the building 5 to 7 days a week, and it could be dealt with in a much more timely manner if we designate it to an employee as opposed to an elected official.
I agree. I also gave Becca my phone number when I'm not here to call me if somebody's disputing a ticket.
Before that timeliness? Yeah, I think
As
that's.
soon as, or it's put on hold until she can get in touch with me. But I think this way seems so much better. Well, you've heard me talk about this. And the way I feel, and I think most of them should just go to the district magistrate. That's where they get adjudicated. But then that affects people saying, well, I came to Gettysburg and I spent blah, blah, blah. I don't know how much you spent here.
Right.
So it's an interesting process. And I'm never coming back.
The problem with them going to the magistrate district judge is that fine expands exponentially because you then get court costs on top of it and
Yeah.
those things. So that's the problem with referring people to the DJ.
Not
and
referring them, that they didn't pay their ticket, it goes there.
There are also, and I don't know these numbers off the top of my head, but I'm sure Ms. Fissel could find them. There's any number of tickets, and I would say a good number of tickets, that are issued every year because someone inadvertently puts a mischaracterized letter or number
Right.
to their license plate. And at the end of the day, they can prove they've paid properly, but because they erroneously entered a wrong digit in their license plate, they're getting a ticket. Our intent is not to hammer that person.
Right.
Or,
right,
I
right.
agree.
With that. And so there's a fairly large number of those types of cases where, yeah, they should be dismissed because, yeah, you tried your best to comply with our ordinances and our parking fees, and you did that, but for a mistake that we all can easily make, you're now have a $40 parking ticket on top of it. That's not the intent of the parking ordinance.
Well, I don't think it's harshness, but it's some of the excuses people come up with.
There are many ridiculous excuses as well. We see that too.
However, so everybody knows, Becca and I have made a process that we sit down and discuss what happened. She shows me pictures, and then we both call the person with our decision. So it's just not unilaterally. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sound that harsh, because there are some people, and I heard you say it, it's not only they
The digits.
switch the digits or get the digits out of order, they have two cars, and then they put the plate in from the other car.
That's what I've done.
Yeah, and I mean, there are some legitimate reasons, but the fact that you can't see a blue handicap meter at nighttime,
Yeah, we do get that.
Yeah.
So are we looking at kind of the chief would be taking care of the oversight of the police tickets, and then the borough manager and the parking manager would take care of the adjudication of the tickets from the borough staff?
Well, that's an interesting question too, because, I mean, if you go to your car and you have a ticket on there do you know which agency issued it to you? I mean, are you going to contact parking or are you going to contact the police directly? Most people are going to call Becca's office and then she's going to say, no, I'm sorry, I can't help you. You got to call the police department on that one.
Actually, I dispute you. Most people are going to call the police department first. and
Is
then
that right?
refer them- Oh, yeah.
Well, I guess we can
What is
compare
the
call
tip?
logs, I guess.
What does the ticket say? To call the parking department?
The ticket does have the parking department's
Okay.
number and
I'm-
my extension on it.
Yeah. I really wasn't aware that the police officers were giving any parking tickets anymore, because I thought that parking, duties were all they didn't want parking duties anymore, and it was it was now the parking department. I feel like we're getting in the weeds a lot. We have very highly qualified officers. We have a very highly qualified parking department. I really feel like this needs to be a parking department issue, and the borough manager, and in the borough manager's absence, the mayor can sign off. But I really feel like we're getting it too convoluted
Yeah.
and mixed up,
Yeah.
and it needs to just be in the parking department.
Okay, any thoughts on Chad's assertion there?
I agree.
I mean, how many?
Do the tickets
How many
look
of the
same?
are the how many parking
So-
tickets are the police actually giving?
So
in a month?
part of the challenge to Mr. Bale's thought there is, if I'm, correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, sometimes your officers are still handwriting tickets. They're not all digital anymore, is that correct?
We
or
don't handwrite any tickets.
Not anymore, okay.
No.
I stand corrected on that.
I don't think we have any books of parking tickets left anymore.
That used to be the case, where there was essentially
We
two
do write
different
a few parking
systems.
tickets. I will say that. We don't write a lot of parking tickets, and they're mostly the
Midnight
the
to
public
6.
safety.
Right,
yeah,
They're the
sure.
public safety,
Right.
blocking this or blocking that type ticket.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, and it's, our officers are very qualified, but they have a lot of work to be doing. And I don't feel like the parking tickets are something that I would want our officers to be focusing on.
Okay.
At the parking.
Any other thoughts? So we'll leave it with the
If-
manager
wait.
and then the mayor as a backup? when
Yes,
he's on
but one
vacations?
thing. If you're writing tickets, is the parking department working? Are they staffed sometimes?
Well,
Becca, that's
sometimes,
an issue I've heard.
So the police write the tickets when we do not have staff.
Yeah.
So or under snow emergency, the police have always done snow emergency, whether parking is here or not. But generally, we respond when we are here. I know the other day, I had an officer call me, somebody was in the restroom, and they weren't answering their radio. So, unfortunately, then they go right to the police and call the police. But the police do issue tickets when parking is not available.
I just wanted, that should be, I think, enveloped in here or thought about or how to handle that. I didn't
Yeah,
use
we do refer parking complaints to the parking department when they're working. So if they call us, we'll ask them to call the parking department. The judge say we can't get a hold of them, and then we'll call the parking department and get a hold of them and refer that to them. Or go handle it if we can't get a hold of them.
Okay. Well, I think we've landed on a reasonable practice here. Do you guys have enough to work with from here on?
I think so. I think the solicitor and I are going to have to, have a powwow at some point and draft some more definitive language here and
Okay,
come back.
I also question, excuse me, if I can add one more thing.
please.
I question what the standard should be for the dismissal of a ticket, because is it going to be the squeaky wheel that always gets the grease, or is there going to be like this, you can get your ticket dismissed for this, stop smiling.
We call them frequent flyers.
But do you see what I'm saying?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that, the standard is like human error, right? Like, either I messed up my license plate or I can plainly demonstrate that the parking enforcement officer was mistaken for this reason and provide a photographic, record of why I shouldn't get a ticket, or if you can prove that the meter is broken. I mean, there has to be some sort of metric, but, if it's just, I don't think I should get parking tickets, like, well, cool, right? We're still going to do that.
I would like to just say that I don't have an exact number, but I would say 60% of my calls are because somebody put the wrong vehicle or the wrong license plate number.
But
And
those
they
aren't the
can-
ones, those aren't the ones you refer to me.
Those are not.
I know.
Those do
She
not
takes
get
care of
referred
it.
to the mayor because they can prove that they paid the wrong plate, they just reverse some numbers, things like that, and they
That
provide
just
their
becomes like an administrative.
an administrative void.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. All right, well, we look forward to seeing some more formal language on that.
Okay.
Harry. All right. Anybody else have any last-minute thoughts on that before we move on? All right, thank you all. That brings us to our second and final public comment section for the evening. This section is not restricted to items appearing on tonight's agenda. We ask that you use the podium. Please state your name and address of residence, and please limit yourself to 5 minutes. Is there any public comment?
You're coming up? Oh, okay. Do you have something to say? Okay. Hi, thank you. My name's Lauren Jean Griffune. I live at 126 East Middle Street with my children. And I just wanted to say one of the things I love about Gettysburg and one of the reasons I bought a home here, there's several things, but I was so impressed that on every Sundays, people protested. I think that's beautiful that people go to church and then they protest or they do whatever they do on Sundays. I love that. I love that freedom, and I love that my children are being raised in a place where they can be a part of that essential piece of our democracy and that part of of being free. And I know we talk about having a permit for people if you're going to have over 30 people. If something beautiful or catastrophic happens in our world and I want to go outside and hold a sign, am I liable if other people hold a sign too at the same time? When do we have a right to protest or gather organically in mass without a permit when something wonderful or terrible happens? Like I said, many of us, hold on, here, buddy. Many of us want to do the same thing for the same reason without organization. We all feel that. That happened during Black Lives Matter. I think lots of people were going out there. They just had the same idea. We go to the square when something bad or scary happens, and we share our solidarity with the world. That happened when Ukraine was invaded. It happened multiple times here. And I just wanted to share something from a friend who wasn't able to be here who says, our right to protest is a fundamental aspect of free speech protected by the Constitution. In public spaces, this right should not be contingent on permits, as it is essential for citizens to express their views without unnecessary barriers, which it is very difficult. The process is too difficult right now for First Amendments. The ability to gather and voice dissent is a hallmark of a democratic society, allowing us to engage in meaningful dialogue and advance and advocate for change. It's crucial that we uphold this right for everyone, especially the next generation, ensuring they understand the importance of their voices in shaping the future. And I think, Elliot, did you want to come up and talk now? Okay, I need you to sit down. And this is our neighbor who asked to come with us, even though her parents couldn't make it. Do you want me to hold this down here so they can see? Or do you want to, can she come here?
It
Here you
bends.
go, Elliot.
It just
Here,
bends.
buddy.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go, sweetie.
Hello, my name is Elliot Taberhood, and I live on 129 West Lincoln Street. I want you to know why it is important to me to protest. So, what is important is I get to hang out with my friends, and I get to protest for a lot of people in Palestine. And I wish I could help them, and I really do. But I know that maybe one day I will get to protest in the big world with my big voice and with my family.
And I did just want to clarify something. For a variety of reasons, I'm here as a private citizen, but for a variety of reasons, I'm intimate with the National Park Service permitting policy. And I know that I can apply right now for a permit for every single Saturday to protest. I'm not limited. I do have to do a single application each time. However, it is free. They do make an exception for the church groups that are getting the amphitheater for the Sunday services. You can apply for 2 in a row in this one case, but due to regulations, they aren't allowed to do anything more than that. But there's no, you can only do a First Amendment protest 2 weekends in a row limitation. I just wanted to make sure that was clear as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there any other public comment? Last chance. All right, thank you, folks. Seeing none, we are adjourned.